actually can't necessarily find much of an advantage for her. So it's even actually probably in a worse position that it is basically tied even in most polls. And I certainly agree with Jerry that historically Trump is always undercounted.
America will choose a new president in 41 days, as well as a new Congress, in the closest and sometimes the most bizarre US election I can remember. And I've covered every one since Ford v. Carter in 1976. The advantage has gone back and forth between the candidates, and at the moment it's pretty much a dead heat, certainly in the swing states. Let's get the latest from Jared Baker, editor-at-large of the Wall Street Journal, and author and journalist Michael Wolff. Welcome to you both. Great to have you on the show. Jerry, let me come to you first. Trump had a pretty bad debate. Harris is the new kid on the block. Trump's campaign seems to be mired in and slowed down. Harris is a better campaign than we thought. Why is she not further ahead?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. I mean, I think the answer is that American politics and American political preferences on the part of voters are kind of so ossified that, as Donald Trump once famously said, he could shoot someone on the middle of Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose any votes. And it's pretty remarkable. If you think you've laid out there very well what's happened in the last couple of weeks, you could go back further. You could say, look, in the last 4 months or so, we've had Donald Trump convicted of multiple crimes. We've had that famous debate in June. We've had Biden dropping out. We've had Trump assassination attempts on Trump twice. We've had a new candidate suddenly emerge on the Democratic side. And guess what? We're basically back where we were 3 or 4 months ago. So, look, there is a very, very narrow, small ground of voters who are going to determine this election in 6 or 7 states. Those are the ones that it's just as you say, it's pretty well 50-50. And it was decided in 2016 by a few tens of thousands of votes in a few states. It was decided in 2020 by a few tens of thousands of votes out of 160 million in a few states. It's going to be those that diminishing and that sort of increasingly rare disappearing thing, the swing voter who's going to determine this election. Okay. Right now, your guess is as good as anybody's.
Well, let's see what Michael guesses. Michael, what's your take of the state of play at the moment?
Oh, geez, Andrew, it's extraordinary. I have no idea. I mean, I guess I certainly follow this as well, alas, as closely as anyone, and I don't know. I mean, certainly every day somebody is asking. Many people are asking me this question, and I think in every other, certainly in every other race beyond Trump, but even in Trump's races, I've always had an opinion. Yes, this is what I think is likely going to happen. At this point, I have no idea. Absolutely none. Almost nothing would surprise me at this point.
Well, that's, Michael, that's quite telling in itself, because it shows you, if it's difficult to predict, that does make it pretty unusual. Let me ask you this before I go back to Jerry. Trump seemed to fall for Harris baiting in the debate. He was advised, stick with policy, don't get personal, don't go on about 2020, don't talk about the past, go for her record, go for her flip-flopping on policy. None of that happened in the end. Is there any sense that the Trump campaign is recalibrating, or will it just be more of the same?
No, well, actually, this is always the tension in the Trump camp. Focus. The issues are clear: immigration, economy. That's where you should be. But on the other side, there is the let Trump be Trump, and that is what usually wins out. By the way, because there's only one person making the decisions here, and that's Donald Trump, and he has one instinct, which is to be Donald Trump. And partly he has that instinct because it has worked consistently so well. I mean, it doesn't win over everyone. It often does not even win over enough swing votes, but it certainly keeps his base in check, and at least half of the time it does win over the swing votes. And that's where he is, and also because that's what he does. I'm not
Yes.
sure he actually could do anything else. So he does what he can do, and what has so far worked pretty well. You might even say amazingly well.
Jerry, I noticed the latest NBC News poll, which I think came out yesterday, has Kamala Harris 49 against 44 of Trump. It's a 5-point lead. That's quite decent. It might even be outside the margin of error. But I suppose the thing you have to be careful is that the national polls don't tell you the result, because the electoral college and how votes are distributed there could be different from the national voters. Hillary Clinton found out in 2016. And I see that in the swing states that will determine the electoral college, it is tight. Pennsylvania, probably the swingiest of swing states, Jerry, among likely voters, 48-48. Among registered voters, 48-48. Among only two candidates with third-party candidates not standing, 48-48. I mean, you couldn't get closer, could you?
Yeah, there are two things to say about the polls, I think, as we, try to figure out who is got any kind of advantage in this neck and neck race. The first is, as you say, the national polls do give Harris a little bit of a lead, but it's very important to remember that it's a lead that both Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden had leads in the national polls, actually larger than the lead that they ended up getting in the final vote. As you say, so Harris has a lead of about 2 to 3 points on average in the national polls at the moment. Back in 2020, at this stage, Joe Biden had a lead of about 8 or 9 points. He ended up winning by 4. So this brings me to the second point, which is there does seem to be, and it may not necessarily work this time, but in both 2016 and 2020, there was a kind of tendency of Trump to outperform his polls. This was put down to the shy Trump voter or whatever it was, but it was particularly striking in those northern states. And these are the 3 states that probably are in the end going to decide this: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. There seems to be a problem with the polling company's ability to get the right samples of white working class voters who are very much Trump's base. They've got it wrong in 2016. They got it wrong in 2020. So if you're a Trump supporter, and I know there are millions of Trump supporters listening to you, Andrew, out there, hanging on my every word to give them some encouragement. If you're a Trump supporter, you look at these polls and you say, well, if the polling area is the same as it was last time, then Trump is probably going to do better than the polls suggest, particularly in those northern states, which means he's probably going to win. But again, as we said, it always reminds me, Nikita Khrushchev apparently once said that when he was asked about the difference between the Soviet system and the West, the problem in the West was that when you have free elections, you never know who's going to win them. And in America these days, we've taken it further, and we've actually, not only do we not know who's going to win the election in advance, we don't know who's won the election after the election has taken place anymore in this country. So, I suspect we're going to be in a very similar place after November the 5th. It may be days or even weeks before there's any kind of resolution.
Michael, 41 days to go. We know, particularly this election year, a lot can happen in 41 days. Do we have any idea, are we going to see another debate, or is that it?
Well, two things. I just want to make one comment about the polls. Even those polls that are being quoted here are just one poll. So in the aggregate of polls, or either in the aggregate or in the list of separate polls, you actually can't necessarily find much of an advantage for her. So it's even actually probably in a worse position that it is basically tied even in most polls. And I certainly agree with Jerry that historically Trump is always undercounted.
And on the debate issue, Michael?
Well, I think the current field of play is that he says he won't. She says that she will and has agreed to a specific CNN proposal, but behind the scenes, he is saying maybe he will.
Okay, we shall see. Last time I saw him on television, he said he'd won the first debate, so he didn't have to have another one. But I think that was what you might call a minority view. Jerry, we're almost at the end, but here's a strange question. Is policy playing any part in this election? Are the economic records of the Biden administration and of Mr. Trump beforehand, is that playing any part? Is that determining, or is it all a sort of personality horse race?
It's not playing any part in the kind of public dialogue of the candidates. As you pointed out, Trump was advised to stick to the record in that debate and really didn't, and preferred to talk about crowd sizes and immigrants eating cats and dogs. But actually, for voters, it is. If you ask people what they're voting on, it is the issues, it is policy, it is the economy. As Michael said, for Trump, it's immigration first and foremost, and then the economy. But of course, also, I think they look at the state of the world and feel very insecure right now as the world seems to be blowing up around them. And they kind of look back on the Trump years, rightly or wrongly, and say, you know what, the economy was strong, immigration was much smaller, and the world was at peace. So I think you're not seeing this in terms of the exchanges really between the candidates. Harris, for obvious reasons, doesn't really want to talk about the state of the economy or immigration or the state of the world over the last 3 years. Trump should be talking about that, but isn't. But I think it's on voters' minds. And I think, again, in a very, very close election, if it is uppermost in voters' minds, if those issues are uppermost, then I think that does give the nod to Trump.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there. It was great to have you on the show. I hope to see you both when I'm over in New York to do the show from New York at the end of October, the week before, and then during the election week itself, that election being November the 5th, Guy Fawkes night in Britain. So there'll be fireworks here and on the other side of the pond too.